Clifford Geertz' Thick Description, Toward an Interpretive Theory of Culture. Clifford Geertz's 1973 essay Thick Description, Toward an Interpretive Theory of Culture stands as a landmark in interpretive anthropology, reshaping the discipline's understanding of what culture is and how it should be studied. Rather than treating culture as a set of observable behaviors or as an objective, measurable reality, Geertz invites us to view it as a semiotic system, a web of meanings in which human beings are both the weavers and the inhabitants. His work challenges anthropology to become a science of interpretation, one that reads human action as text, layered with meaning. Let's walk through the key ideas, the philosophical underpinnings, the practical applications, and the critiques of this approach, while taking the time to appreciate its subtleties and the tensions it invites. Culture as a system of meaning. Geertz begins with one of his most quoted lines: "Man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun." This metaphor encapsulates his conviction that culture is not merely a set of tools or practices, but an intricate symbolic system. In this view, rituals, customs, and even small gestures, like a wedding procession or a ceremonial dance, are saturated with meaning, and these meanings are inseparable from the contexts in which they emerge. Drawing from hermeneutic philosophy, especially thinkers like Paul Ricoeur and Hans-Georg Gadamer, Geertz treats cultural analysis as an act of interpretation. We do not merely observe what people do, we try to understand what it means to them. This is why a ritual or a social custom cannot be reduced to its outward appearance. Think of it this way: a wedding is never just an exchange of vows. It is a public declaration of social bonds, a performance of values, and a reaffirmation of community identity, all at once. The method of thick description. Borrowing the term from philosopher Gilbert Ryle, Geertz distinguishes thick description from mere description. It is not enough to record that someone winked, we must ask whether that wink was a nervous twitch, a private joke, a parody of someone else, or perhaps a political signal. As Geertz explains, behavior must be attended to, and with some exactness, because it is through the flow of behavior, or, more precisely, social action, that cultural forms find articulation. This means anthropology's task is not to measure, but to interpret, not to strip actions of their context, but to embed them within it. This interpretive method has found use far beyond anthropology, in education, where teachers seek to understand the diverse cultural backgrounds of their students, in healthcare, where practitioners strive for culturally sensitive care, and in business, where decoding workplace dynamics or consumer behavior demands attention to local meanings. The semiotics of culture. Geertz often describes culture as a text to be read. Here, his thinking overlaps with structuralists like Claude Lévi-Strauss, but with one critical difference: Geertz rejects the search for universal deep structures and focuses instead on local meanings. His famous study of the Balinese cockfight, for instance, is not an anthropological curiosity about gambling. Instead, it's an interpretation of the cockfight as a cultural performance, one that mirrors the community's status hierarchies, rivalries, and unspoken tensions. In other words, the cockfight is a stage, and on it, the drama of Balinese social life plays out in miniature. Interpretation as science. This approach redefines anthropology as an interpretive science, one concerned less with discovering universal laws than with constructing readings of human life. As Geertz puts it, doing ethnography is like trying to read, in the sense of construct a reading of a manuscript. The implication here is profound. Anthropologists are, in essence, translators, moving between worlds, turning lived experience into written analysis, all the while mindful that their own interpretations are partial, provisional, and shaped by context. Local knowledge and contextuality. For Geertz, no interpretation can stand outside the context in which it is made. This leads to a caution against imposing foreign frameworks onto local realities. Comparing Western market economies to traditional barter systems, for example, without attending to the cultural values and social logics that animate them, risks misrepresentation and misunderstanding. This point has resonated strongly in post-colonial anthropology, development work, and intercultural communication, where the stakes of misunderstanding are high. Everyday relevance. Beyond its theoretical significance, Geertz's interpretive framework has real-world value. In cross-cultural communication, recognizing symbolic systems helps diplomats, negotiators, and global business leaders avoid costly missteps. In the corporate world, ethnographic methods uncover consumer motivations and workplace cultures that surveys alone cannot capture. In education, thick description helps teachers see their classrooms not as neutral spaces but as culturally saturated environments, where each student's learning is shaped by unique social contexts. In healthcare, this approach supports culturally sensitive care, enabling practitioners to align medical practices with patients' own understandings of health and healing. Critiques of Geertz's approach. Of course, Geertz's work has not gone unchallenged. Some scholars argue that his emphasis on interpretation comes at the expense of methodological rigor, privileging subjective readings over empirical verification. Others note that thick description itself is not precisely defined, leading to uneven application across disciplines. Postcolonial critics point out that Geertz often overlooks the ways in which power relations, colonial histories, political dominance, systemic inequalities, shape the very symbols he analyzes. And for some, his resistance to universal principles risks sliding into cultural relativism, where even harmful practices are shielded from critique under the banner of local meaning. These criticisms remind us that interpretive anthropology, while rich and illuminating, must grapple with the demands of both rigor and ethics. Conclusion? Geertz's thick description transformed anthropology by shifting the focus from raw observation to the layered interpretation of meaning. It reminds us that to understand another culture, we must read its symbols as carefully as one would read a complex text, attending to nuance, context, and the lived experiences of its people. Despite debates about its limits, the essay remains a foundational guide for anyone who seeks to navigate the intricate webs of human significance, whether in academic research, professional practice, or everyday life. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep updated on our upcoming content.